Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. 10 years ago, I built a dream resort on the edge of a quiet lake. Now, a power-hungry HOA president is trying to erase it from existence. One fake map, forged document, and midnight invasion at a time. They started a war. What they didn't expect was that I'd fight back. 10 years ago, I stood on this same hilltop with a rolled-up blueprint under my arm and mud on my boots, staring at what most people would have called a dump. An overgrown field, the crumbling bones of a boat rental shack, a collapsed pier, and a driveway eaten alive by weeds. But I didn't see decay. I saw potential. A boutique lakeside retreat, elegant and private, with just enough rooms to stay exclusive and enough waterline to make it irresistible. I poured everything into building it. I'm not being poetic. I mean everything. My savings, my time, my career as an architect. I designed every inch myself, from the curved cedar deck to the stained glass above the lobby fireplace. I slept on a cot in the construction office for 2 winters. I negotiated zoning approval with a clipboard in one hand and a shovel in the other. And now, Lakeside Haven is one of the highest-rated boutique stays in Colorado. 8 rooms, 5 stars, 1 proud owner. I don't live here, not really. I've got a place 20 minutes down the highway, but I'm on site most days. I like to walk the grounds before the guests wake up. It keeps me grounded. The smell of fresh coffee from the kitchen, the sun rising off the lake like a gold coin. It reminds me why I did it all. The manager, Anna, runs day-to-day operations, and she's damn good at it. We run a tight ship. No drama, no complications. Or at least, we used to. There's a gated residential community just past the trees on the east end of the property. Lake Point Shores. Fancy houses, manicured lawns, and a homeowners association so smug you can smell the HOA fees from a mile away. We've coexisted peacefully for years. I've had guests rent kayaks near their boat slips. Their kids come over for ice cream on summer weekends. Nothing but polite nods and friendly waves. Then came the leadership change. About a month ago, Lake Point Shores elected a new HOA president, Marcia Grayson. The name didn't mean much to me at first, but the shift in energy was immediate. The polite emails stopped. The passive-aggressive ones started. Concerns about traffic patterns. Noise-level inquiries. One resident claimed the reflection off our new pergola roof was distracting his meditation. I thought they were just adjusting to the season picking up again. I figured it would blow over, until Anna called me last week and said, "You might want to come down here. HOA sent someone over. They say you're in violation of their residential tranquility mandate." Residential what now? She laughed, but it didn't sound amused. Exactly. I didn't think much of it at the time. Probably just some miscommunication or a board committee member with a clipboard fetish. Nothing I hadn't seen before, but in the pit of my stomach, there was a flicker, something I hadn't felt in years. A sense that someone wasn't just annoyed, they were gearing up for a fight. And they had no idea who they were about to mess with. I showed up at the property the next morning expecting to deal with a grumpy letter or maybe a passive-aggressive community concerns flyer taped to the gate. What I didn't expect was a silver SUV parked squarely in the guest drop-off zone, hazard lights blinking, and a woman in a crisp navy pantsuit directing her phone like a laser pointer at everything in sight. The hedges, the valet stand, even the hummingbird feeder by the lobby window. "Can I help you?" I asked as I walked up the path. She turned like she'd been waiting for me. Mid-50s, perfectly ironed hair, posture that screamed power trip, and a laminated badge around her neck that read, "Marcia Grayson, HOA President, Lake Point Shores." "Oh, good," she said. "I was hoping to speak to the property manager, but the owner is even better." She extended her hand like this was a real estate showing and not my business. She was trespassing on. "I'm Jason Becker," I said slowly. "And you're on private commercial property." She smiled like I just confirmed her suspicion. "Exactly. That's the issue." She launched into a monologue that sounded rehearsed. Something about community harmony, increased foot traffic, erosion of residential identity, and the dissonance between our commercial activity and the HOA's peaceful environment. I blinked. Was she trying to say the existence of my hotel offended her? She finished with, "Which is why I'm here today, to request that you cease operations until we've had time to formally evaluate your compliance with our residential tranquility standards." I stared at her. You realize this isn't part of your HOA, right? This land was zoned commercial 2 decades ago. I have licenses, permits, tax records. Hell, I've got the deed in my truck if you want to see it." Marcia's smile widened. "That's the problem. The proximity. When your guests use the lakeside trail, they pass within visual distance of our west-facing homes. That creates a shared usage atmosphere, whether or not your paperwork says otherwise. That's not how property works. It's how community works," she snapped. And with that, she pulled a rolled-up print from her oversized tote bag and handed it to me. It was a proposed compliance map with new HOA boundary overlays that included my parcel outlined in dotted red. Bold letters read, "Pending annexation, community impact zone." Pending by who? I asked. "Our board," I laughed. "Lady, this is a hotel, not a rogue backyard trampoline." She didn't laugh. She just pulled out a small metal placard from her tote and marched over to the front entrance, planting it beside the valet stand. It read, "Private HOA zone, no commercial use without board review." I looked at the sign, then back at her. "That's going in the trash. Then you'll be hearing from our legal team." She got into her SUV and drove off without another word, leaving her sign like a middle finger in bronze. Anna came out a moment later holding a coffee cup and staring at the placard. "Is this real?" "Oh, it's real," I muttered, "and she's not bluffing." It didn't take long for Marcia's nonsense to seep into the neighborhood like a gas leak. Subtle at first, sideways glances from Lake Point residents jogging past the lakefront trail, tighter lips when my guests smiled and waved. Then came the letters. Anna handed me the first one a few days later. It was printed on Lake Point Shore's HOA letterhead and titled Community Impact Notice. According to the document, ongoing commercial operations adjacent to our neighborhood have generated multiple concerns regarding visual noise, increased transient presence, and degradation of communal serenity. I read it 3 times trying to decide if it was satire. It wasn't. Marcia signed it personally, in blue ink, with a little embossed HOA seal at the bottom, like this was some medieval proclamation. The letter ended with a strong recommendation that we suspend all short-term bookings while the HOA conducted a community compatibility review, which again had 0 legal authority, but sure as hell looked official enough to rattle the average hotel guest. It didn't stop there. Marcia and her board went full tilt on the propaganda train. They mailed flyers to every home in the HOA with the headline, "Is our community becoming a resort town?" in bold red letters. One of my guests brought me a copy, asking nervously if we were about to shut down. Then came the parking patrol. 3 HOA volunteers in neon vests began loitering by the property entrance, taking pictures of guest license plates and scribbling in notebooks like amateur investigators. One of them tried to issue a warning citation to a delivery driver dropping off produce. He laughed in her face and peeled out of the lot. I installed more cameras that week. It would have been funny if it wasn't starting to bite into business. A couple canceled bookings cited neighborhood concerns as the reason. Anna overheard one guest being warned by a resident that the property was under review and might be closing soon, which, again, total fiction, but rumors travel faster than facts. Marcia upped the ante by requesting a formal code enforcement inspection from the county. 2 guys showed up midweek in dusty polos and clipboards, apologetic but thorough. They walked the whole grounds, checked permits, fire suppression systems, ADA compliance. We passed, obviously. Still, it wasted half a day and left our kitchen manager pacing like a caged animal. The kicker was the sign. One morning, I arrived to find a brand new metal street sign installed just outside the driveway entrance. Not a city sign, mind you, an HOA installed piece of fiction that read, "Residential Tranquility Zone, limit unnecessary traffic." It looked official enough to confuse guests. And that was the point. I filed a complaint with the county and the Department of Transportation. Turns out, erecting fake traffic signage on public easements is a misdemeanor. Not that Marcia seemed to care. She doubled down and sent a newsletter saying the sign was a courtesy reminder for visiting motorists. The audacity was breathtaking. I started documenting everything: photos, video, written complaints. Anna created a running spreadsheet titled HOA Shenanigans Day by Day. But even with all that, I hadn't expected what came next. HOA volunteers began directing traffic. They stood near the hotel's private parking area, waving down cars and telling guests that this zone is restricted, or worse, that the hotel was no longer operational. One of my oldest returning clients, an elderly couple from Santa Fe, called me, in tears, thinking they were being turned away from a closed hotel. I had to personally walk them in and apologize. That was the day I realized Marcia wasn't just playing HOA president. She was staging a soft invasion, undermining our legitimacy without ever crossing legal lines outright. Not yet anyway. But I could feel it coming. And I'd be ready. It was a foggy Tuesday morning when Anna called me, her voice clipped and tight. "Jason, you need to get down here. Now." I was already halfway through my second coffee and scrolling through emails when I heard those words. Something in her tone twisted my gut. I didn't ask questions, just grabbed my keys and drove. When I pulled into the lot, the first thing I noticed was the new signage, or rather, what used to be ours. The elegant carved wooden sign I had commissioned years ago, the one that said Lakeside Haven, Boutique Resort and Spa, was gone. In its place stood an ugly plastic board that read HOA Community Center, Members Welcome. It was bolted into the same post, like nothing had changed. "What the hell?" I muttered, slamming the door behind me. Anna met me halfway down the path, red-faced and shaking with fury. "They came during the night. HOA people. We have them on camera. 2 trucks, 4 guys in safety vests. They took down your sign and replaced it with that thing." Like they were doing construction, I marched straight to the front gate, and then I saw it. 2 more signs were staked into the flower beds: private HOA property and guest entry by reservation only. Except the reservations didn't refer to my system, it referred to some website I'd never heard of. HOA branded. Inside the lobby, things looked worse. The receptionist's desk had been cleared of branded materials. Flyers and pamphlets from Lake Point Shore's community events were placed neatly in a holder on the front counter. Our own brochures. Gone. "They walked in like they owned the place," said Mia, the receptionist, nearly in tears. Told me they were reclaiming the space. One woman even tried to access the reservation computer. I stared at her, stunned. "You let them touch the system?" "No, of course not. I pulled the plug before they got far. But Jason, they had key cards. HOA key cards. That stopped me cold. We use a digital entry system, sure, but the master override cards are specific. Customized. They'd either cloned them or broken in and reprogrammed the locks. I checked my phone and logged into the security system. Camera feeds showed the exact moment they entered around 2:17 a.m. 4 people. One of them was definitely Marcia, still in heels, striding through my front door like she was inspecting a model home. At one point, she literally turned to the camera, smiled, and waved. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just about noise complaints or neighborhood harmony. This was coordinated, strategic. She wanted to erase my business from the map and install her own narrative in its place. I called the police. 2 officers arrived within the hour. One younger guy with nervous energy and an older sergeant who looked like he'd seen one HOA power trip too many. "Looks like criminal trespass and vandalism at minimum," the sergeant said, reviewing the footage on my tablet. "And if they tampered with your access systems, that's another level entirely." They took statements, collected screenshots, and told me they'd file a full report, but I could already see the caution in their eyes. Marcia wasn't just a crazy neighbor. She was president of a well-connected HOA, and these things had a way of getting political. Still, I wasn't backing down. By that evening, I had a locksmith on site replacing the digital locks entirely. We updated every access code, revoked every old card, and installed secondary door controls with biometric backup. I wasn't taking any chances. Anna printed and posted laminated signs all around the property. Private commercial business, entry by owner authorization only. And on the main entrance, I mounted a sign of my own. Trespassers will be prosecuted. Smile for the cameras. But the damage was done. A handful of guests had already checked out early. Our Google reviews started showing weird comments about ownership changes and community center atmosphere. One even mentioned new HOA programming events, whatever the hell that meant. Marcia hadn't just crossed a line. She dragged it across my property like a knife. And now it was my move. It didn't take long for the fallout to begin. The morning after the sign stunt and forced entry, I received a certified letter, delivered no less by a grinning man in an HOA polo. The envelope was thick, glossy, and obnoxiously formal. Inside was a cease and desist notice, drafted by some boutique law firm apparently retained by Lake Point Shores. It accused me of operating a disruptive, non-compliant commercial entity adjacent to protected residential tranquility zones. They even had the gall to suggest that my guests routinely violated the visual sanctity of the community. I didn't know what the hell visual sanctity meant in legal terms, but I was pretty sure it didn't trump my property deed. Anna and I were still sifting through surveillance footage from the invasion when the second hit landed, a notification from the County Code Enforcement Office. Apparently, the HOA had submitted a formal complaint requesting a suspension of my hospitality license pending emergency zoning review. That little trick alone could freeze operations for weeks, if the county took it seriously. I made a dozen calls in an hour. My lawyer, my accountant, the zoning department, even my state rep's assistant. Anyone who might slow down the bureaucratic tidal wave Marcia had kicked off. Kelly, my attorney, was already reviewing the HOA's cease and desist with visible disdain. "This isn't a real action," she muttered. "It's performance theater with a letterhead. But we'll file a counter notice just to slam the door shut." Meanwhile, the guests kept getting weirded out. A family from Denver told Anna someone in a reflective vest approached them in the parking lot and warned that the resort was being reclaimed. A man trying to check in was told by a neighbor that the hotel was closed indefinitely pending. Investigation. A honeymooning couple checked out early after a woman from the HOA committee offered them a better deal next time at one of our Lake Point B&Bs. Lake Point B&Bs? HOA was now advertising alternative accommodations like they own the damn shoreline. But the real kicker came when a county inspector actually showed up. A man named Darnell, polite and visibly uncomfortable, knocked on my office door with a clipboard and a strained smile. "Mr. Becker, I'm here to verify the use permits on file for Lakeside Haven. We've received multiple citizen complaints and a formal request for review." "From the HOA?" He didn't answer, but the look on his face said it all. We walked the property. He checked our ADA signs, fire extinguishers, occupancy charts, septic logs, everything. He kept apologizing the entire time, like someone who knew he was being used, but didn't have a choice. By the end, I handed him coffee and a flash drive with our permit documentation. "Thanks," he said. "Honestly, everything looks in order. I'll write it up clean." Still, the damage wasn't in the paperwork. It was in the uncertainty. Guests were seeing the commotion. Some were canceling before even arriving. One corporate retreat bailed entirely, citing instability concerns. The bookings calendar was starting to bleed. That's when I realized I couldn't just play defense. The next morning, I made the decision. I called Kelly and said 6 words. "We're going to court. No delays." The summons arrived folded in gold-trimmed stationery like an invitation to a wedding, if the bride were a lawsuit and the groom was pure audacity. Marcia Grayson had filed for a community boundary correction hearing, citing historical plat inconsistencies and a need to clarify the community's territorial integrity. In plain English, she was trying to redraw the goddamn map to include my property inside the HOA's jurisdiction. Kelly nearly choked on her latte when she read it. They're not even pretending anymore. This isn't about tranquility. It's a land grab in slow motion. I'd seen power plays before, but this was different. This was calculated, aggressive. HOA didn't want to shut me down. They wanted to absorb me, control me, and paint over everything I'd built with their beige suburban brand of tyranny. The hearing was scheduled fast, too fast. We suspected Marcia had greased some wheels in the zoning office. Kelly filed a request for continuance and a full discovery motion. While we waited, we dug. We got our hands on the so-called updated map that Marcia submitted to the county. It was a piece of modern fiction, a scanned aerial view of the neighborhood with a red line awkwardly extended over my parcel. The word community zone expansion, pending ratification, scribbled in the legend like it was already a done deal. The document was signed by the HOA's boundary consultant, a man who, after some research, turned out to be Marcia's cousin, a retired mall security supervisor, not a licensed surveyor. We brought in a real one, Randall Krieger, a veteran land surveyor who'd worked on half the lakefront properties in the state. Randall reviewed our property records, municipal plats, GPS-tagged cornerstones, everything. "There's no ambiguity here," he said, flipping through the printouts in my office. "Your parcel's boundaries haven't changed in 20 years. They're trying to annex you by fiction." He drafted a notarized report, which we filed alongside our opposition brief. Kelly even attached copies of Marcia's fake map, highlighting the blatant differences from the county's own records. We also included a breakdown of the metadata from the submitted document, complete with timestamps and the original file name, HO Zone Proposal Final Edit 2.psd, real subtle. Meanwhile, on the ground, things kept escalating. I arrived one morning to find new HOA maintenance signs zip-tied to trees around our parking lot. Someone had taped a note to our staff door. "Your compliance is expected soon. Don't delay progress." Anna was livid. They're acting like this place is already theirs. I didn't blame her. Guests were still coming and going, but you could feel the tension, that edge in the air like a thunderstorm no one could see, but everyone could smell. The final straw came when one of the city zoning clerks called us, off the record. She said someone from HOA had submitted a revised zoning narrative that claimed Lakeside Haven was an unpermitted lodging facility operating under a grandfather loophole. A loophole? I built this place from the ground up, filed every paper, passed every inspection. There was no loophole, just Marcia's growing desperation. Kelly smiled coldly. They're not winning in court, so they're trying to poison the well administratively. Time to go public. I nodded. I was done playing quiet. The press release went out that afternoon. Headline: Local hotel owner fights HOA over property grab. Fake maps and forced entry spark legal showdown. We sent it to every outlet within 200 miles. Attached video stills, quotes from Randall. A timeline of HOA interference. Within 12 hours, the story was trending locally. HOA's Facebook page went on lockdown. Marcia deleted her LinkedIn. And I scheduled a meeting with the county commissioner because if they were coming for me with fakes and threats, I'd fight back with facts, signatures, and public outrage. The gloves were off. It came in a manila envelope stamped with the seal of the county planning department. At first glance, it looked like another bureaucratic nothing burger until I read the words, "Notice of temporary operational suspension. Effective immediately, Lakeside Haven was to cease all commercial activity pending final zoning verification and community impact review." I sat there in my office, reading that line over and over again, like it would change. It didn't. Anna burst in 2 minutes later, eyes blazing. "Guests are asking why their keys aren't working. The door locks are down." What the hell is happening? Marcia had done it. She'd found a way to force a shutdown without a court order. The planning office claimed the action was procedural, based on the pending dispute. Technically, it wasn't a punishment. It was a pause for investigation, the bureaucratic equivalent of "we'll call you when we figure out how badly we've screwed up." I called Kelly, who was already on her way to file an emergency motion. "They're leveraging the pending boundary hearing to freeze you out," she said. "It's not legal, but it's effective. We'll challenge it, but it may take days." Days I didn't have. Guests were checking out in clusters. Some demanded refunds. Others didn't wait. They just left, looking spooked. The spa director cried in my office that afternoon. She'd just hired 2 new massage therapists who had now been sent home unpaid. That night, the lobby was empty. The kitchen went dark. The lake was silent. And then the real insult arrived. HOA vans rolled into the main lot around sunset. 2 of them branded in that smug dark green with Lake Point Shores Community Services painted down the side like they were some kind of humanitarian aid group. Volunteers in matching polos hopped out and began stringing balloons across the entry arch. I stood at the gate, watching in stunned silence as a folding table was set up beneath a pop-up tent. A vinyl banner fluttered in the evening breeze. "Welcome to the future, HOA Community Retreat Preview Event." "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered. Marcia wasn't there herself. Too smart for that, but I recognized several HOA board members grinning like realtors at an open house. One handed out flyers to passing residents. "Tour our newest community asset before its official relaunch." I marched across the lawn toward the table. A wiry man with a clipboard intercepted me. "Sorry, sir, this is a members-only event." "I own this damn place," I snapped. "You're trespassing on private commercial property." His smile didn't waver. "Actually, according to our latest community assessment documents," I cut him off. "There is no legal annexation, there is no approval. You people are staging a fantasy." He gave a shrug and stepped aside, clearly unwilling to escalate. I didn't need to. I had something better than an argument. I had footage. The next morning, I held a press conference outside the locked front doors of my hotel. Microphones, tripods, a row of local journalists with notepads ready. Anna stood beside me, arms crossed like a bodyguard. Kelly read a brief statement, citing property law violations, unlawful use of private assets, and ongoing harassment. Then we rolled the tape. Marcia's crew stringing balloons, handing out flyers, pitching the narrative that Lakeside Haven now belonged to HOA. It hit the 6 o'clock news. HOA's email servers probably melted that night, and while they were scrambling, I made a few calls of my own to the Department of Consumer Protection, the state's Small Business Advocacy Office, and 3 friends who worked in real estate law and owed me favors. If Marcia wanted a war of attrition, fine, but I wasn't going to let her bury me in red tape. I'd burn the whole paper maze down first. The courthouse smelled like pine-scented floor polish and old sweat. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Kelly, flipping through a folder of evidence for the 10th time, not because I needed to. Hell, I could recite most of it from memory, but because it gave my hand something to do. Marcia sat across from us, flanked by 2 HOA attorneys who looked like they billed by the hour and dressed by the ego. She wore a smug little smile like this was a performance and she already had her closing bow rehearsed. She wouldn't even glance my way. Judge Caldwell entered without fanfare, a tired man with a trimmed beard and the dead eyes of someone who'd presided over one too many petty neighbor disputes. I could only hope he recognized this wasn't one of them. Kelly opened with calm precision. She presented our deed, our zoning permits, tax records, and Randall Krieger's official boundary survey. She laid out the sequence: false signage, unauthorized entry, impersonation of ownership, and finally, the forged annexation map submitted by Marcia's team. We displayed stills from our surveillance footage, Marcia walking through our lobby at 2 a.m. like she was casing a bank, HOA volunteers misleading guests, the absurd community retreat banners strung across our gates. Kelly's voice never rose. She didn't need drama. The truth was already a spectacle. Then it was their turn. Marcia's lead counsel leaned hard into the community benefit angle. He claimed Lakeside Haven operated in a gray zone, that my original permits were grandfathered without clarity, and that recent community development agreements allowed the HOA to advocate for new oversight. He used words like partnership, vision, and harmonization, like they meant something other than control. Caldwell looked unimpressed. Then came the curveball. A man in a cheap suit stood up in the gallery and raised his hand. "Your Honor," he said nervously, "may I request to be heard as an interested third party?" Caldwell raised an eyebrow. "State your name." "Trevor McGill, former legal advisor to the Lake Point Shores HOA board." That got Marcia's attention. Her neck stiffened. The attorneys didn't even try to hide their surprise. Trevor was sworn in and took the stand. And then he dropped the bomb. "I resigned 6 weeks ago after learning that the HOA president, Ms. Grayson, had directed the fabrication of a fake boundary overlay. I was instructed to submit it to the county under my credentials. I refused." A beat of silence, then murmurs. Caldwell leaned forward. "You're saying the document was falsified deliberately?" Trevor nodded. "Yes, sir. She knew the property wasn't within HOA boundaries. The goal was to create just enough confusion to allow a procedural shutdown. She called it a paper siege." Her words, not mine. I didn't move. I didn't smile. But inside, I felt my ribcage shift with a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding since this began. Kelly remained composed, but I caught the tiniest twitch in her cheek. She was thrilled. Trevor submitted an email thread between himself and Marcia, complete with timestamps, metadata, and one glorious line: "If we can't own it, we can freeze it." That was her. Judge Caldwell exhaled and leaned back, his fingers steepled. "That will suffice for today." The gavel didn't fall yet, but the weight in the room had shifted. I could feel it in Marcia's silence. For once, she had nothing to say. The judge ordered a temporary injunction barring the HOA from claiming any affiliation with or authority over Lakeside Haven. He scheduled the final hearing for the following week, pending further witness coordination and potential referral to law enforcement. On the courthouse steps, a reporter stuck a mic in my face. "Mr. Becker, is it true that the HOA president fabricated zoning documents to seize your business?" I smiled, just enough to be dangerous. Let's just say, the truth has a way of surfacing, even when someone tries to bury it under paperwork. The final hearing was scheduled for a Wednesday. The sky was gray, the kind that made the courthouse bricks look like something out of an old war photo. I wore my best suit, black, no tie, and walked in with the calm of a man who'd already seen the inside of the beast and brought back the receipts. Marcia was there, of course, sitting stiffly beside her lawyers. Gone was the smile. Gone was the glow of control. Her expression now was pure PR damage control, tight-lipped, chin high, but her eyes scanning constantly like she was waiting for an exit to open behind her. Judge Caldwell wasted no time. He recapped the findings. Trevor McGill's testimony had been verified. Metadata matched. The email about the paper siege had been traced to Marcia's account. The fake zoning map had been submitted without authorization, signed under false pretenses, and used to file procedural actions that directly harmed a lawfully operating business. The judge called it an egregious abuse of civic mechanisms for personal and political gain. Then came the ruling. Lakeside Haven was officially, publicly, and permanently declared not under the jurisdiction of Lake Point Shores HOA. All prior claims, actions, filings, and publications asserting otherwise were nullified. The county planning office was ordered to expunge any record of the HOA's boundary request and issue a statement clearing my property of any zoning infractions. Then came the damages. $1.1 million compensatory for lost revenue, reputational harm, legal cost, and disruption of business operations. Marcia's attorneys objected. The judge overruled them so quickly it might have been choreographed. But the real blow came last. Judge Caldwell paused, then addressed the room. In light of the witness testimony and submitted documents, I am referring Ms. Grayson's conduct for criminal investigation under fraud statutes related to public record manipulation, falsification of legal documents, and trespassing with intent to interfere in commercial enterprise. You could hear the oxygen leave the room. Marcia didn't flinch, not right away, but as she stood to leave, a pair of plainclothes officers in the back stepped forward. One reached into his jacket. The other quietly said, "Ms. Grayson, please come with us." Her voice cracked for the first time. "This is a mistake." The handcuffs clicked anyway. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. Former guests, local business owners, some Lake Point residents even. I saw Anna in the front, recording everything on her phone, smiling like she'd just witnessed divine retribution in real time. Reporters swarmed, flashbulbs popped. The HOA's name was now etched in headlines that included the words fraud, arrest, and illegal land grab. Back at Lakeside Haven, I walked the grounds in silence. The lawn was still, the lake was calm. The front sign, Boutique Resort and Spa, was exactly where it belonged. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was defending something. I felt like I'd won it back. We reopened on a Friday. The kind of morning that feels rehearsed by the universe. Sky clear, sun steady, wind just enough to lift the flags outside the entrance. Anna insisted on fresh-cut flowers in the lobby. Mia made muffins from scratch. I wore a jacket for the first time in weeks, not because I had to impress anyone, but because the weight of the past month had finally lifted, and I wanted to stand tall. The new sign was the same design as the original, but with one small change. Beneath Lakeside Haven, Boutique Resort and Spa, in smaller copperplate letters, we'd added a new tagline: real ownership, real peace. We didn't do a ribbon cutting or anything dramatic. We didn't need to. The statement had already been made, in court, on the news, and across a dozen articles shared like wildfire through local networks. My inbox was flooded with messages from other small business owners. "You gave us hope." About time someone took them down. "What HOA are you going after next?" Even a few Lake Point residents reached out privately, apologetic, grateful. One of them left a gift basket with a note that just read, "Thank you for not backing down." Marcia, of course, was gone. Pending charges, frozen assets, a complete internal audit of the HOA board. 2 other board members resigned within 48 hours of her arrest. Rumor had it a full re-election was on the way, and the HOA would be switching to a third-party management company until further notice. The irony. They put out a statement saying they would no longer interfere with neighboring commercial enterprises. Translation: we got caught. Bad. Kelly stopped by that afternoon. She didn't stay long. Just long enough to drop off a check, first part of the payout, and grab a muffin. "Don't spend it all on a rooftop bar," she smirked. "No promises," I said. Later, I walked the grounds alone, not inspecting, not securing, just walking. The lake shimmered like polished glass. A couple sat on the edge of the dock with their feet in the water. The spa had a soft hum to it again. Real people, real peace, just like the sign said. I ended up on the back deck with a glass of bourbon and no noise but birds and the clink of ice. It wasn't just about winning, it was about keeping what's yours when someone tries to rewrite the rules. About drawing a line and daring them to cross it, then making damn sure they regret it when they do. They tried to steal my name, my business, my identity. But this place, It's mine. Always was. Always will be.